And we're live with the road. Today I'm joined by Guldborg. He's an LEC talent and NLC talent, and he's making his way. Just finished MSI and starting to get ready for the new summer split for 2020 summer LEC. So Guldborg, can you tell me short about now in Denmark? There's a lot of popular interest in Counter-Strike. So that's maybe the obvious question to start with. Like, why are you so interested in League of Legends, and how did you know that that was your game?
I mean, I always started out when I first started playing games. I had my old shitty laptop, which was it couldn't really play any games, so I was playing Warcraft, Frozen Throne of that. So it kind of had the MOBA aspect. So when League come out, it was really natural for me just to make that switch instead. I did play a little bit of Counter-Strike, but I was never really good at shooters. I only started becoming good at shooters when I really invested more time into that later on into my life. But League was just the easiest transition for me back in the day. So it was only natural for me to like, this was the game I was passionate about. This is the game I want to work in. So that was kind of the thought process of it.
Okay. So one thing that might be a bit weird for people to a story that not many people know about is like the story of how you rise as a caster in League of Legends. So can you maybe go through a bit how, like, first of all, maybe why you chose casting instead of being a player, and then afterwards you can talk a bit about like the rise you went from the Telia Ligaen, and then how you got your call up to NLC, and then how you got it further up to the LEC.
I appreciate you ask why instead of a player, because I was quite good back in the day. I was top 800 on the server, at least while I was in high school gymnasium there. So I definitely could have tried to at least make an entrance into the RL scene, try and become a player instead. But I just quite quickly realized how much time and effort you have to invest into the game. Not to say you don't have to invest time as a caster, but as a player, we're talking scrims, like 5 scrim blocks at least, and then you have all the time you need to spend afterwards playing solo queue instead, right? So it's just your entirety of the life you have to really give up for that. And I wasn't really ready for that either. I did like going out partying. I did like going out with a weekend with friends. I did like having a girlfriend on the side. I did had other aspects of my life I really cherished that I still wanted to continue with. And I did cinematography studies in when I was in high school. But the problem was I was really bad in like behind the camera, so I was always put in front of the camera by my group. So it's really natural for me to make the transition into casting instead. And how that really unfolded was just that I finished high school, gymnasium, whatever you want to call it. And then, it's quite natural for a lot of Danes, at least, that we want to have a gap year. You got to get a job for 1 year, maybe, go out, travel the other year, go back and study university, whatever you want to do. Like, it's quite natural that you just try and get work. So everyone's trying to get work when you finish it. And I applied for 60 jobs, and I did not get a single one of those jobs. Randomly, I find an ad on Facebook that's like, we're looking for casters at this little studio we built. I say studio like this because it was like 3 square meters, little net cafe area with a webcam in that we were casting from. Either way, and I got that job. That was the first job I got. I remember I got notified. I was sitting in my mom's basement, the stereotype for sure, and I was just jumping up and down over the fact that I got a job that paid 150 Danish crowns a day, right? Because that was just how big it was for me to get into it. Later on, I then got a job at a bakery, and then later on I got a job at my former middle school or primary school, public school, whatever you want to call it. And it got real messy because I got notified of those jobs within the same day. I just gotten in my job interview from the bakery. Then the school called immediately after and was like, we want to give you a job too. Luckily, my boss at the bakery was real nice, so I did part-time. And that ended up with me in the beginning having a schedule that was at 3 in the night. I would wake up, I would open the bakery at 4:30 in the morning at the central station, make coffee, be a little barista there. Afterwards, if the school called and said they needed a substitute teacher, I would then leave by 8 or 9, depending on when I was needed, go to the school, do all the schoolwork to 15 or 16 because that's how long the kids are staying in school now. And then afterwards, get home, get dressed, iron out my shirts, and then go to the net cafe that was like an hour away from me still by public transport. I've never had a car, so it always public transport in Denmark. Get there, do the casting for like 4 and 5 hours for 150 Danish crowns a day, right? And then get right back, sleep as fast as I could if I had work in the morning the day after because, you only get like 3 hours sleep, 4 hours sleep if you were lucky. So that's how I really transitioned to at least starting out as a caster, which was, I did that for a year and it was a lot. And the reason I did that for a year was just because I needed money on the side. Casting doesn't pay very much. You need a backup plan, right? So I needed something that could pay the bill, and that's why everything was so stressful in the beginning.
God damn. Okay, that's actually crazy. And you ran that for a whole year.
The thing is, those 3 jobs wasn't always at the same days, right? That was like,
Yeah.
at worst, they could happen on the same day, but sometimes the school didn't need you. You didn't cast all 7 days a week, right? But like on the worst of the worst days, that would look like that.
God damn. Okay. So you had this casting job like together with the other jobs. So this here where you found like your calling for being a caster? Like, did you enjoy the work that you put in like rather than maybe playing it as much, but actually commentating it?
I think for sure. Like I generally feel like, I mean, it's 2 different. What do you say? Like, a dopamine rush you get out of it, right? Playing it, you feel good, having fun with it. But casting it also just like the whole atmosphere, being in front of a camera, having fun with a co-caster between you, and finishing a cast where you're like, I felt really good about that. Once, like some of the best days I've had is actually not from some of my recent days. They're from back in the days when I first started out, and you start improving, you start noticing how you get better and all this stuff. Those were my favorite days when I was walking home, and then it's an hour by public transport, so I'm just checking Twitch chat on my phone to see how what the comments were while we were casting, what the feedback, what people were saying, and it just turned into being always overwhelmingly positive. Like, no one was saying any negative stuff about us. They absolutely loved us. Me and Nico back in the day, who's my co-caster back then, and that could just like make your entire evening. That was like being a caster. You felt good about doing what you did, but you could also feel good after you left and you just went home and you just had the adrenaline still going through you.
Oh yeah, okay. So you were the first one, like you casted with Nico first, and this was back when it was called LCD, right?
Exactly.
League Championship Denmark, and they also made some pretty funny memes about you. So there was like a small Danish community about you guys around this time, and you were like maybe the main protagonist in this story of the Danish local scene. So can you maybe talk to me a bit about how this scene like treated you, but also like what was the feeling of you maybe starting out having this little scene and this little following behind you?
I mean, starting out, you definitely still got mean comments. I still remember the first mean comment I got, which was like, because I was nervous, right? So I was just like jiggling in front of the camera. So they were like, does this caster have ADHD or what's going on in the camera? Like, I remember that very vividly, right? But of course it expanded. And the reason why these memes started unfolding is just we got free Red Bulls at the studio. So I kept drinking Red Bulls because, obviously I had a very tight schedule. So quite often I was tired and needed a Red Bull in terms of being ready for work. And apparently I just drink Red Bull in a really funny way. So it ended up with a lot of people just clipping and putting it into montages, how I drink Red Bull. And I think that kind of started it all. And that later on also started getting me Red Bull gigs, which is really funny that it ended up like that. But either way, it's like, I think it's just like, it made you relatable, right? You're not just some cocky asshole coming in. You're a goofy, well, I looked like a child back then, probably still do a little bit today. And people were just, it's something I miss, actually, because I felt like when I was only in the Danish scene, the community was way more tight. Now you're in the big stage. There's so many people. There's so many opinions. But back then, it was like you had a reliable group of people, like 100 to 200, that would always just like be so supportive, be so like, if I got new opportunities, they were the first one being in the comments, backing it up. And I think even getting my first DreamHack job, when I got that, it was a lot of the fans when I didn't get it initially that went to Twitter and then just typed out, where's Guldborg? Why have no one hired this guy? And I think to me that was really the first time where I felt incredibly lucky, because it didn't really feel like fans. Like when they are this tight in a niche community like that, they're kind of just your friends. It was just really overwhelming and very wholesome back then, and it's certainly something I miss today.
Yeah. So can you maybe talk to me a bit about, well, why is it like, did you ever look at like Counter-Strike when you were at Danish lands? Because like Counter-Strike is just like almost the only game that's played in Denmark. So were you ever thinking of like maybe why League wasn't as big as it is in Denmark, or maybe like did you hope something like something could skew in League's way to make it more popular in Denmark?
I think we had a good time where we had a lot of Danes, right? Bjergsen when he first started out, and we had all the Danes really just flourishing through the entire Danish Splice roster as well. But I think the main problem with League is just that it's a really complicated game. You can't really easily get into it, but in the era where Astralis just completely dominated the CS scene, anyone could watch CS. It's a really easy spectator sport. You can watch it with your mom, and the concept is very simple. Kill all the enemy teams, defuse the bomb, or keep the bomb, like, for not being planted. So the general concept of Counter-Strike, of course, they get more complicated if you're really nerdy about it. But for an average viewer, it's really easy to follow. In League, we almost have 200 champions, right? There is no way if you just sit down, you're going to know what's happening in front of you. So I think it's the barrier to entry. It's just really difficult for League. And people don't want to just, sit around and try and learn about a game they don't really love from the get-go. But whereas CS, you don't even have to play the game to understand it. I think it's just way easier to follow. And I think because we've been as good in Counter-Strike as we have been, not only Denmark, but in Scandinavia, Sweden, Ninjas in Pajamas back in the day, Fnatic as well. I just think it was like very natural for these countries to become a CS country instead, first-person shooter country. And, sometimes I do think, damn, I really wish I was a CS caster instead. Because, you take a look at the other Danish CS casters, right? I'm international, they're local, but we're probably making the same amount of money. Like, we're probably living for the same. If they're not, they might even be making more than me, right? And they can do it from home in Denmark on national TV. That's so cool. And I really wish, I had those same opportunities. Unfortunately, League is just not that big at home.
No, but again, but you can instead cast in front of a big international audience. And
I guess that is true.
Yeah, and there's more viewers in League than there is in CS, especially on a weekly level. But let's talk a bit about Telia Ligaen and how you got up to that gig. So can you tell me a bit about how League's GG and how you came up to not League's, sorry, how you came up and got the offer for Telia Ligaen?
I mean, Telia was just LCD that kind of got rebranded into the Telia Leagues afterwards, and I think it just felt natural for anyone to include me. It's going to sound cocky, but it's like, there wasn't really that many casters, okay? I'd been here for a while, and by this point in time when Telia came out, I already was a DreamHack for the first NLC league there when that came out. So I think it was only natural that I was going to be in the second division as well. And for the first time in a long time, they had a competitive pay. It was still not on top, what do you say in terms of, it couldn't really be matched in terms of the international gigs, right? But for a Danish gig, what you got for the day, it was actually really good. It was good money. And all of a sudden it seemed like, okay, League is going to be a thing in Denmark. And all of a sudden we started pulling 500 instead of the 200 we used to back in the day. And it really looked like everything was going to go up. And then the League just kind of dropped. And that was really unfortunate. But I think for getting Telia was just a natural fit, and it just made sense.
Yeah, so was it in Telia Ligaen with this better pay that you got there? Was this where you found out that casting is what you wanted to do for the future?
I think I found out way later as well. I was still but because even when I was doing Telia, right, I was still working at Flames. I balanced those jobs in between each other, and I never really knew what I wanted specifically. I knew I felt good about doing both jobs, and my thought process back then was just, whatever is going to be able to give me a stable living, whatever is going to make me give me the safest infrastructure, I'm going to go with that, because they're both risky in the end. So whatever was just kind of lining up, I would have probably taken. And since casting was, well, first Flames really did it, but then casting came through, and then I started, getting more international, getting flown out, and that disrupted my work at Flames. So all of a sudden, I just knew that casting was the more safer choice to go for as well, and it was more fun as well. I get to do a lot of the stuff that I love with casting, which is not only in front of casting the game, but outside of the game, especially with LEC, where we make skits. You get to be creative, right? You get to make dumbass videos, funny video. I love being in front of a camera, also outside of League. I love doing other stuff where I have to act. I think that's really, really funny. So I think casting really just elevates that, and it puts me in a spot where I don't have to focus on one thing, but I can do multiple things.
Yeah, okay. So you're in the next music video. Got you.
No, I hope so.
Oh, that would be fun. But okay, so Telia Ligaen, it didn't really feel like a natural step to get up to the NLC because there wasn't many people in the Danish casters. You were the only one who really got the job and became a stable part of the NLC. So can you maybe talk to me a bit about how that happened? How did you get that offer? I mean, you mentioned earlier that you worked a bit on the LEC at DreamHack, but was it those connections, or how did you get the opportunity to get up there?
It's funny because I've always thought that whenever I try to quit something, apparently it just straight up drags me back. And there's two instances, so it's gonna have a little backstory here.
Yeah.
But basically, what happened first was I had my gap year. I was making my jobs. I did half a year of casting in LCD back in the day, which is before Telia, right? And my job was to then, I want to go do charity work. My plan was to go to Vietnam and be an English teacher for kids in like small villages and help them out and all that, which is what I had saved money up for. That's why I kept those 3 jobs. And then when I wanted to quit that job, and I was like, great, I'm booking this trip to Vietnam. I'm going to go, save the world. I'm going to help out kids. Then Flames kind of was like, and they're like, hey, do you wanna work in esports management instead? Do you wanna work with League? I was like, fuck, okay, I guess this is kind of a once in a lifetime. I guess I have to do that instead. So I did that, right? And then I stopped casting a bit. I worked for Flames. We had a League team, and then after that, I got back into casting. And when I got back into casting, I thought, okay, I'll see how long I can go with this. And that's when NLC kind of got swapped up because DreamHack was going to make the merger. DreamHack, they acquired UKLC, they did NLC, they put more resources into it, which was the back then Nordic League. And I didn't get the Nordic League, which was really disappointing for me because I felt like I was the Scandinavian caster you needed to have for the league. So when they didn't announce me for the Nordic League, that's when like all the fans came out and they're like, why is Guldborg not here? And there was multiple people that did this to the point where the caster that did get the gig, which was back then Hiprain, Excoundrel, and Orcs, they messaged me and apologized. And they were like, sorry, we never intended to take any work from you or anything like that. And I thought that was ridiculous because I never worked in the league, right? And they've already worked on a bigger stage. So I thought it was only natural. Of course I was sad, but instead of being petty, instead of just being mad at these guys for potentially taking what could have been mine in the Nordic League back then, I just helped them out. I gave them all my information about all the Nordic players that I had watched over the years and I had, kind of become an expert on, and gave them all the storylines they could run and all this stuff. And that kind of I think that made them want to pay me back. So when the finals came for Nordic League, they invited me onto the finals and I was a guest. And after I became a guest, then they invited me for the split, which they were like, okay, we'll fly you to Sweden, we'll book you an apartment, it's going to be great. And then COVID hit, but either way, I still got the job. So I never moved to Sweden, but I was able to do NLC from home. And that's kind of how I got the NLC gig. Yeah. It's just every time I try, I feel like, I need to quit this and move on with my life. Something in esports just drags me back. And I think I'm just incredibly lucky.
Yeah. Yeah, really. So how was it like? What was like the main differences between like casting the Telia Ligaen and then NLC?
Well, first off, it was a different language, right? So it was me finally going into English casting, which it's very difficult. If you're casting in Danish, even if you haven't planned your sentence out yet, you can always just improvise with it. And you'll have some sort of Danish saying or other stuff in your vocabulary. You can just add as flores into the sentence and it'll sound good. I don't have that in English, right? It's like you can have normal casual conversations, but you don't have like the sayings in English. You didn't grow up there. You don't like understand all the references to like other things you can use in the sentence to make it more spicy or make it sound better. So it's very difficult. I think I was very basic at first, and because of that, I had to make up for it by being a funny meme character instead and just like ride the Denmark train, because that was what I did. I was the only Scandinavian caster, right? So I just fully pulled on the nationalism from the Denmark. It was just the Danes are the best players in the world. And that was kind of just where I got it from, right? And then it does help when the Danes are performing. It makes it way easier. So I think when I got the NLC, I had to experience a different part of casting, which was like I now had to implement humor. I could not only rely on just natural instinct. I had to work harder all of a sudden in English to make things work.
Yeah, but like again, something that's pretty notorious in Denmark is like Danish people are generally really good at English. I mean,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, there was some baggage. Like there was something that helped you from home as well when it came to this English casting. But what about the what about like the people around you? Like, could you feel there were more people watching you? Like there wasn't. One thing that was funny about like the memes we talked about back in the LCD is like normally there's focus on players and plays, but this one had like these memes had focuses on you and Nico as casters instead. And like, could you feel like some kind of difference between like the audience or maybe your coworkers? And like, was there anything there that like made you feel like this was a bigger step and this was a bigger audience than the Telia Ligaen?
100%. I mean, we had guests in like Guldborg and Medic back then as well, which was like, wow, I not only did I make a step to the NLC, all of a sudden I'm working with LEC casters, which for me back then was, it was the dream. It was absolutely incredible to be working with these experienced people. But even not looking at the LEC talent, but working with the guys from the NLC, they had way more experience than me. They had been in Spain before casting leagues there. They had done the UKLC, right? So I was learning a lot, and it's interesting. I've always felt like wherever broadcast I moved on to, I was like, it's going to sound bad. I don't mean the worst out of them, but I was always the most inexperienced one. And I still feel like that moving even today at the LEC, right? I've always find it quite natural to be okay with that, to just look at the other people and just learn from them, because in the end, that's the only way you really move forward. So I definitely felt that I did have steps where it really took me a while to get into a good groove of not only being nervous when there was more people and it was English, but also feeling way more natural and still being able to bring out your own personality instead of just going like all the standard stuff, like this is that matchup, this is this. You don't want to be too rigid. You don't want to be too boring. You want to bring in some flair that makes it entertaining to watch as well.
Yeah, so this was maybe where you was this where you had to find out that you like had to wear some kind of persona, because like in the Danish leagues you had like a lot of personality, but I think that was shown through like your love of the game. But this was this the point where you knew that you had to put some, not really a persona, but like put some kind of character on to make a great show for the audience?
I think it's still very difficult to this day finding out like what is it you put in front of the camera. It's like, it's difficult, right? Because how much of it is yourself and how much of it is you putting something on camera for the sake of hoping that viewers will like it. And to my experience, the later one doesn't really work. Like I never think you can fully bring 100% of your own personality to the camera. I think like if you do that, you're absolutely incredible and you're probably one of the most talented people. It's very difficult. But I also think that you can't just put another person that's not you in front of the camera, because people are going to notice. It's going to seem unnatural. You're not going to be able to vibe with people. I think I learned that quite quickly. I remember one specific broadcast I had where I watched it back and I hated all of it. I was cringing throughout the entire VOD review section of my cast, and I just thought to myself, I'm never doing this again. So I think for sure that I don't know how much difference it is. It's really hard being cognitive of it in the moment, because you always want to put something of yourself in there. But it's something I'm still working on to this day, finding out like how much of yourself are you bringing out? What is your brand? And I think it was just easier back in Denmark because it was your own language. It was about Denmark. It was easier having fun. I vibe better with Nico back in the day. I still think to this day that he was the easiest one for me to cast with out of all the people I've cast with, which is quite a lot at this point, right? But it just speaks to the kind of good synergy I had. I'm kind of getting it with Medic now, and we are going to start casting a little bit more as well. So hopefully for the future, there'll be more fun and more meme material ready instead of just, very rigid casting.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can trust on the Danish audience there to generate some great memes when that happens. Something I was wondering a bit about. Could you the personalities, they were greater. Like you like what exactly did you learn from like these more experienced casters back in LEC, and maybe also in the LEC now? Like, is there some points as a caster that you hadn't thought about, or maybe something you thought, well, might not be as important, and then they changed your worldview around it? Or
back then, I think Guldborg was definitely the one teaching me the most. I think she had back then, you just went in front of a camera and you cast it, but she had developed theory to casting. And I think that really inspired me to do my own theory in terms of when do you talk about what, when can you build a storyline on a player and kind of develop a system. So I think that's what really I learned the most back then. Not specifically them telling me do this, do that with that, but they inspired me to do more theory into why you do this in casting and what's kind of the purpose of it. Instead of just saying stuff like everything you say needs to either matter in terms of a storyline or something you're building up in the game. You want to cut out as much as stuff that doesn't mean anything. Of course, there will be room for humor, which doesn't mean anything to the game, but that can mean something for the audience. But that's still a purpose. You want to make sure that whatever you have is a thread that you're just kind of following the storyline along with. I think that's what I developed the most when I was working with the more experienced talent. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so tell me, you started casting back in Yeah, you said start of COVID, you were at the Telia Ligaen and NLC, so that was like 2020. And now it's 2022, and you've had two split, 1.5 split maybe, guest as at one and one full split. So how do you get from the NLC to the LEC in 1 year, 1.5, 2 years?
You're incredibly fucking lucky. That's that's the answer for that. Because here's the thing, okay? If you're an inspiring caster, never look at my story. Never do what I did, because I didn't do things completely correct, for sure. I have never in my life created a show reel. I've never applied to a person and said, hey, this is what I look like. This is my casting. Please hire me. I've just been hired. I was just incredibly lucky, okay? When I first got DreamHack, right, it was because of the fan base. It was because of the clips that the community created. I never created my show reels. My community created the show reels, which is hilarious thinking about. When I got NLC, that was lucky. When I then got European Masters, which is like, you know, the kind of big second division kind of league, you can describe it as a league. It was because Forskuren, who I work with at the NLC, who kind of helped me develop, just sent me a message and was like, hey, what's your WhatsApp? Let me send it to Quickshot. I was like, okay. I sent him my WhatsApp. Quickshot received it, and he was like, hi, let's set up a meeting. We set up a meeting. I'm sitting at European Masters. I'm doing European Masters. I'm working there. I get into more conversations. Not even networking, because I hate networking. I'm really bad at like going out with people for the sake of just, you know, I find it, I'm really bad with social media and everything that's fake. I like to consider myself a person that's very natural. So I really don't like going out for the sake of just going out and building a association with people. But it just came natural because they did it instead, right? So it's just, oh, great. Now I'm at European Masters again. Now I'm guesting at the LEC. Now I had a little spotlight I could do in Ready Check that I did from home. And it just like, every piece just kept moving. And of course I was working hard, but there was always something that kind of helped me push along the way. So once again, never look at my story and think that it was enough, because I for sure should have done even more than I did, which is absolutely crazy to think about. Because when I look back, I was like working myself to the bone, like really to the point that was not healthy. So I think, yeah, for sure, there's a lot of luck involved, hard work, and I guess just don't be an asshole as well when you work events. I think that's why people reach out to me when I talk to these people and all that. I was never like an ass kiss or anything like that. I was just sitting there talking with them normally, giving them the space they needed. When they wanted to talk to me, I talked to them. If they were vibing with me, they were vibing with me. And it kind of just developed from there. Just never be an asshole. Like that's like the best advice I can give to anyone. Always be nice to people, even if they're on the same level as you. And you don't, and you're like, especially like, let's say I was working LCD. I'm like, oh, I don't like this cast. I can talk trash to him because he's not going to be at LEC that I want to be at. I think I can do that. Never have that thought process, because I can't, like, the amount of people I worked with back then who are either now working in professional teams. Pat was a coach at LCD back then. Pat is coach for Matt Lyons today. Dunby was at Astralis. Like, there's just so many people, you know, who's like, you started out with them and they elevated themselves as well. You want to be nice to all the people all around you all the time, wherever you are. Just be a good human being. That's really going to get you far.
Yeah, exactly. And this, like, I couldn't imagine, like, this was the reason why, like, Frosk and Medic, they got eyes up for you, because you might have, like, put in a good impression while they guested the NLC, right? So that was like, sure. so there was like some kind of connections as well, and some, like, you can call it networking, but it was more like, you know, them joining your broadcast as guests, and then something greater happened. Okay, so can you remember, like, your favorite play that you've casted? And do you remember do you have one play you're thinking, oh my god, this was just amazing, and this was really just my play? If you like, you almost take ownership of it.
I think there's one in LCD back in the day where a coach had to sub in. Yeah. And he had to sub in for his team instead. He was playing Gragas, and the game was incredibly close. He was inting at first. It was really back and forth. It all comes down to this Baron, and for some reason he gets into the back line of the Baron, gets access to the pit, and 1v5 Smite steals it or something like that. And I just remember we were losing our mind, just screaming, the coach just stole it. The coach just fucking stole it. And it was incredible. But that's one back in the day. I think one of the more recent ones was one I did in LPL with Hysterics. where it's a backdoor in the LPL coming through, and it's a LeBlanc who's just kind of sneaking through, and Hysteric starts talking about how this LeBlanc is super sneaky, might not tell the wife about it, that's how sneaky he is, or something. He came out with weird analogies when we we're just talking, and I just told him, shut up, stop putting yourself in the image, like, let's just follow the play. I can't remember specifically how it goes, but Hysterics posted it. It's incredibly hilarious. The guy jumps in, wins the game on a backdoor. So definitely that one from the LPL. It's funny. I can't remember much from the LEC where I was like, wow, that was absolutely incredible. I remember I had one moment with Matt Lyons that got featured in like a highlight video then afterwards. But I can't, for the love of God, remember what the highlight was about. I just remember I was featured.
It's okay. I mean, it's way easier to remember 2019 G2. I mean, if you want to talk like, but it's okay because I think like the Gragas one with the coach. I mean, that's like a great play that you always can think back on and think like, okay, this is a good memory that you can bring with you further on.
For sure.
Okay, let's talk a bit about the LEC then, because now you have you've gone through NLC, you have gone through your EU Masters, you come up to the NLC, and suddenly you are on an analyst desk with sjokz as your host. You are sometimes Quickshot as your host, and then you're casting with Quickshot as well, and Vedius and the others. So maybe like your first-hand experience in joining LEC, maybe like as a guest first, and then maybe as a full-time afterwards.
As a guest, I don't know. It's weird, right? You've been doing so well your entire life in your career, and then all of a sudden, when you get to LEC, you feel like you need to do something different. You need to feel like you need to do more than what you've done so far, because now you're an LEC, and that's just such a dumb thought process. Because in the end, they put you on the broadcast because of what you did so far. So there's no need for you to change that. But that's like a mental barrier you kind of have to work with in the beginning for sure. And I think working with sjokz, she taught me so much. Like, she's incredible. By far the best experience I had of working, her and Quickshot probably, out of any of them. They did so much to try and make you comfortable. They taught me so much, at least on the analyst desk, with sjokz, how to carry myself, signs to give on the broadcast, how to probably have a conversation without making it too blurry, too many points in it, but staying to 1, 2, 3 points you really want to get across. And yeah, she's great. She's amazing. Having to work with a host like that is the easiest time of your life ever. So I think I learned a lot in the beginning working with sjokz. Then it kind of moved on from like, okay, I did a lot of analyst desk, now move on to a little more casting. And I think my casting was very rigid in the beginning. I was looking a lot at community feedback as well, because you're told as well, oh, have a look at Reddit, see what people actually think about you. That can be a really bad experience or a really good experience, depending on how you did on the day, because all of a sudden you can have 100 of people hating or liking you, and that's a big step, just reading those comments immediately. And I think I've just over the course learned some people are going to like you and some people are not going to like you for what you bring out. So there's no need to try and cater to all of them. Just bring whatever you want to do on the broadcast, go in and have fun, because if you do that, people will have fun too as well. So I think that's something I've learned very recently, especially at this MSI as well, and that I failed at a little bit last Worlds play-ins, where I had to be like, holy, I'm at Worlds. I need to once again do like even better, elevate myself to a point. So in my mind, I had to be even better that no one could ever be. So I could never really achieve that. So every time I walked off the broadcast, I was disappointed. I was down in the gutter. I felt horrible because I thought to myself, this is not good enough. You have to do even better. That's just not how it works. Of course, you can have goals and ambitions, but you need to put your expectations in line with something that's way smaller so you can improve, right? And I think I've done that recently. I think MSI was some of my best casts I've had in a really long time, because me and Medic just came in. We had a good time together. Even then, some fans will be like, wow, it sounds like Medic and Guldborg hate each other, because they haven't watched LEC. So when we're bantering or, we're having a little rough humor, Danes and UK Brits rather, have a humor that can be a little dark, a little edgy sometimes as well. And I feel like people just misinterpreted that, which of course is, you don't want that to happen all the time. But I also don't want to take that away from me, because that's what I do. I bring humor to the broadcast. And if you think I hate my co-caster because of that, you just need to watch a little more. You just need to, get in line with it, because it's really not what's happening. And I think I'm just going to stand my ground and stay with what's me and not what anyone else kind of tells me to do.
Yeah, I mean, this sounds a bit like an evolvement of you as a person and you
sure.
as a character, because when you try and become like have these unrealistic expectations, like you can say sometimes it's like impatience, but other times it's basically you wanting to be as good as you can for as fast as possible. But that's normally not how like improving it at things works. So when you come and try and be the best person you are and you can be, and you don't accept it, and then you want to like change everything so you can come to that next level, right? And now it's like and you could call that an identity crisis. You can call it whatever you want. But now, like with your story here, it sounds a bit like you have found your identity now as a caster, and or at least trying to develop that personality that which we talked about earlier. So like that's a really good thing, because then people can resonate with you and people can see, okay, Guldborg, he's my caster. Like some people have Quickshot as their favorite, or back in the day all the other casters that's been there. So that's like really key for the image that you want to portray, but also for the entertainment. And as an entertainment product, as the LEC is, right, you need like a diverse personalities on the broadcast, right? But how do you think like these different personalities, they really like they work together on the LEC? For like, how do you think, for example the Medivedi thing, they have their own thing going there, and yeah, all the different like personalities there are on the LEC, like how do you think they play together to make this product as great as it is?
I think they do really well with it, and I think they realize that themselves, of course, at the same time. I think they're very proud of the work they put out as well. But it also makes it difficult for a person like me, who's a newcomer, to suddenly come in, and then you have to all of a sudden change these systems a little bit, because you need to make room for an extra person, right? And that was very difficult at first for people. And even to this day, there's not one caster that I'm assigned with. I am everywhere. Like, you'll see me on the desk. You'll see me with Medic, sorry. You'll see me with Dracos. You'll see me a bit with Quickshot. But I don't have a designated duo that I will cast with. So I think for me specifically, in coming into these systems, I just learned to try to just be the joker, be the wild card, have an ability to know what this person wants to talk about, have an ability to know how you vibe with this person. And I think the best Reddit comment I ever read about myself was that some person said, wow, I really like Guldborg, not so much for what he's saying, which is fine, but more for the fact that it just seems like you can pair it up with anyone and he'll have a good time with the person, because we had treats and, we had Niski in as guest as well. And I think that's kind of my ability on broadcast as well, that you can slot me in with all these different people, and I'll know how to be myself. So I think obviously these people are working very well as a duo, but also individually. But I think me coming into this one, I have to work the best individually, and then know how to apply myself to a duo, so we can, because well, maybe at some point, but coming in the beginning, if you slotted me in with Medic, I was not going to sound as good as Vedius would with Medic, and that would just be fact. That would be a lesser good cast than if you had Vedius in. That, I mean, it's kind of just fact. It's not me being like hard on myself in any way. So you have to realize, how do I bring myself to this cast without it being Guldborg and then Medic, but being like a duo with Guldborg and Medic, where Guldborg is still bringing his flair, and Medic can then all of a sudden bring more of his individuality into it. That's not something he would do with Vedius, perhaps, because they are so good at bouncing together and kind of just becoming a unit. It's a tricky one, right? Because it goes into the question, like, what do you prefer, having individuals or having duos? And I think in the end, having duos works way better, because people are kind of building it up. But that just means I have to work even harder and become, the person that can just be slotted in and work with these systems.
Yeah. So when did you find out like this was like the role you had to partake in, like be the jack of all trades?
Unfortunately, way too late, I think. It took me at least half a year or something like that. And like, it was not in the first split. It was for sure in this new year, coming into probably start of this year, that I kind of realized that this is what I have to do instead. Because once again, it comes down to expectation setting. You cannot come in and be perfect with a new person immediately and just smash it out the park. That's just not going to happen. And I felt very lonely at first, because I didn't have that designated duo, right? And I kept thinking, I need to have a duo. I kept thinking, I need to find a person that I do this stuff with. And because that person would never show up, because that's not how the systems would work with me then implemented, of course I'd be kind of sad about the work I was doing or my role in the work. And I think I just kind of needed to shift my mentality to the point, well, just work on yourself once again. Just keep doing you. Just keep bringing, vibing with whoever's you're coming in with, and just do you on the broadcast. And I think that's something I really realized kind of after Worlds start this season as well, when I started being implemented once again with more people. And honestly, that Reddit comment I mentioned earlier, that really helped me as well, because back then I wasn't doing it like consciously. That comment just said that, and I was like, wow, that's something I'm going to continue on then, because that sounds great. Like the fact that someone's recognizing that I work well with people, I'll continue to try and expand on that then, and make that my thing then.
Yeah. Well, that's a great trait to have. I mean, you have also worked with a lot of people like throughout the years, and I mean, like, isn't Nico like the only real designated duo you have had throughout?
Yeah, kind of. I guess you could say Duckling as well at Telia, because that was like kind of the approach I took. But even then, I definitely think, like, when I think of the duo, for sure, it was always Nico back in the day. Even on NLC, you know, we would be swapping in casters every now and then for different play-by-plays. So yeah, 100%. I do think that Nico was my designated duo, which is crazy to think about, right? Because that was back in 2019, 2020 when it started out, and that's just so long ago now, and I've never had that duo again.
Yeah, but then again, like, Nico was only for like half a year maybe, and now you've played for now you've worked in casting for like 1.5 years further, or almost 2 years more. So why do you think like that you had the mindset of you needing a duo when you actually been like this man on your own rodeo, if you can say it like that?
It's weird, right? It's just the mental gymnastics that you feel like, oh, everyone has a duo. It's always been there, right? Like you think of like, say, Captain Flowers, Kobe Freak, Medivetti, Draco's Cage Roll. It's just like, you look at them and you're like, well, everyone has a duo. I guess I should have a duo too. And you kind of just forget the fact that sometimes you can do stuff differently. Things is not as black as white and they seem. But when I started out, you know, everything was moving so fast, and I thought I needed things to go one specific way. And I think that just kind of put it in my head that I had to make it happen. But obviously, I didn't. Right? Like it sounds so dumb as well when you say it like that, because I worked. Okay, let's say Telia, NLC, European Masters, LEC, LPL, like just those 5 broadcasts as well, with different people all the time. Yeah. And for some reason, I still felt like, oh, I need to have a duo, even though I never have one. I always just slotted in with people like differently every week. So yeah, for sure, it's interesting how I arrived at that point. But I finally realized that I don't have to do that. So I think that's great.
Yeah, I mean, that's a part of being like either unhappy with your own performances, but also being uncomfortable in a position, and then you want to like become like the best that you can, and then you steal from everywhere, and then you see like the one point that everyone else has is like the duo, but that might not be like the real, like the reason that either you are hired, or even a reason why like you should become better, because you have so many colleagues around you to help you as well. Can you talk to me a bit about VOD reviewing and how you see your own casts, and how do you find like these little things that you need to improve upon, but also like how such a VOD review goes? Like, do you have Quickshot sitting with you and watching it together, or are you like 5 people in a room, in a conference room, and big screen, and then you all are like, how do you do it?
So they have at Riot once every 2 weeks, it kind of shifts where who's getting a VOD review out of the duos that are kind of casting. Since I'm not a part of a duo, that also means that I haven't really been getting as many VOD reviews. I think throughout my time with Riot, I've gotten 2 VOD reviews. And that's almost a year going forward now, right? So a lot of the work is by myself looking through the VOD reviews. But just to quickly explain the Riot ones. You come through with the product manager who's watching the cast that you had. You have 2 other casters from the group. Usually it'd be Rioters that's watching it. So that's either Vedius or Quickshot as well. So one play-by-play and one color caster, and then the product manager. So the product manager will usually look at storylines and be like, I really love that you talked about this about the broadcast, because they can set up different shots or scenes or storylines in the future that can lead it on like this. Like, they want LEC to continuously have a story about the players and teams. The casters can talk about the in-game stuff as well. Like, you should have talked about this itemization. You should have talked about this matchup. You should have driven the conversation here. Your tempo was bad, or whatever it is. And these VOD reviews are ruthless, okay? You need to understand that they are not attacking you. They are giving you constructive criticism that you can work with for your cast, and they will not put a damper on it, which I absolutely love. I need people to say things straight. I can't have it that they just cover it in. So that's perfect, because you literally just get a sheet and it's like, work on this, and you're like, this is great. I have stuff I can move forward with. But then that doesn't happen too often for me, so I quite often have to sit down with myself, just listen through it, and I kind of just listen through it by two categories. One, by a fan, like, was this entertaining for me to watch and listen to, and did I learn something, like if I just put myself in the shoes of an average fan? And two, the theory, once again, the own theory that I built up. Am I happy with the way that I am speaking? Is the tempo good enough? Did I miss something on the map I should have talked about it instead? Did I miss dragon timers? Did I miss a rotation coming through that I should have noticed before, so I could have highlighted it on the minimap? It's like these things you're kind of just going through, and I think they're way easier doing when you're doing it with another person, because you get multiple perspectives on it, and that's really important for a thing like casting, where there's not right or wrong, but it's very subjective.
Yeah.
So getting as many opinions in on it is very important. So usually VOD review is very much up to yourself, and once again, for even existing or inspiring casters, you can try and rely on help, you can try and get people to watch it for you, but generally, I'd just watch it through myself, and I'd try and see what kind of, before you went into the cast, what kind of things did you highlight? And did you successfully highlight these things? And if you didn't, go back, find out why you didn't, and then keep on working with it.
Yeah, so do you like work out maybe a storyline, or maybe have something you want to talk about during a cast, like before the cast? Like, have you prepared something? Like, can you maybe give me an example if you, yeah.
For sure. So let's do LEC for one. So what you want to do as well is that you're coming in with two teams. First of all, the storyline's coming through in terms of, let's say that we're talking about new rookies coming in, right? Then you've done some prep. I casted Rika a lot during the European Masters. So I was talking about Rika, building him up as a person, because the average fan wouldn't know about Rika. So I would have to give them all the information that I was an expert on when he was playing the previously split. So knowing there's enough for the viewers to grasp onto. And then there's other stuff like over-highlighting Upset, for example, with Fnatic, because this is a very bot-centric team. You want to discuss why it's bot-centric. You want to explain how they do it. So you're not just explaining a point. You want to explain how you get there, basically. You want to make the viewers understand everything. And if you can do that good enough, well, that's great. And a way to realize this is that you write your storyline points down. You go to Reddit afterwards. If Reddit is talking about what you talked about, even without mentioning your name, then you did a good job. That's kind of like an indicator. So if you go to Reddit, if there's no bad things about you, that was a good cast. If people are happy about you and mentioning you specifically, you did absolutely amazing. That's kind of that's how you're setting the like community response from that point.
Okay, well, I mean, aspiring casters can't just, use Reddit like that.
That's for sure. So I think an aspiring caster would just have to do, like, watch back themselves, like, write back the storylines themselves once again, and then, go back into the games and look through it. So what I do is I did a lot of VOD reviews with Duckling, and I did a lot of VOD reviews with Don Jake, who's now doing the English LFL instead. And what I'm kind of doing there with them is that, for example, let's say they're bad at setting up objective timers or setting up a fight. League is, of course, a game that is very different every game, but there's also things you can always count on. At the 8-minute mark, a rotation will come through from the bot lane, move up to the top lane because they have to fight with Herald. The play-by-play caster can set that up before it happens and sound incredibly smart, because people always forget about it, but it will happen.
Yeah.
And it's something you can improve on. And that's something they forgot quite a lot, for example. So that's something we'll have a look at in the VOD review in terms of the more theory behind the game. Not so much a player storyline. That's more like you just realizing that yourself. Did I talk about this player? Oh, yes, I did. Great. But realizing, okay, objective timers. Did I set my color caster up properly enough before a team fight, or any things like that? So that's way more the theory, and that's why I think having two people as well is really good, because it's like, when should you do it? When does it sound good? Does it seem like it's a red thread once again, like one story, or you're just blabbering going in with multiple storylines all the time? A really easy pinpoint of this was when I first started out with Duckling. He kept talking about a Jhin build that just really didn't matter for the game. It was a new patch, a new Jhin build had just came out. It was the right Jhin build that the Jhin was building, but Duckling kept flaming it because one of his friends has said that the build was bad. But it was the build you had to go through. And every time he had a storyline, instead of moving forward with the game, he would go back to the Jhin build, which he was wrong about. So it just sounded really bad, because instead of driving a game forward, he just kept digging his own grave deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's something as well, you kind of have to realize. You have to admit that sometimes you're wrong as well, and sometimes the information you've been given is not always correct. I've even had moments like this.
Oh yeah. Another thing, like during a cast, like you have some points that you want to bring out, right? But your co-commentator also have some points they want to bring out. So are there like some points where you won't like get your point out because like maybe the timing has missed, or maybe your color commentator or your co-commentator has put like a different storyline forward, so you can't just force your own point into the conversation?
If you're good, like if your prep is good, that really never happens. Just because you align on points that you want to talk about, you agree to what the setup will be. Sometimes a point won't come through, but that is not because of your co-caster. If once again, is the co-caster is a good co-caster.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to fight each other on broadcast. You want to become like a singular thing with the same storylines. The game can go a different way. My example, once again, with Fnatic was a team that played a lot for upset down towards the bottom lane. Well, what if one game all of a sudden they start playing for top lane? You can't then just run the storyline that look how much they play for upset and then they're not doing it in the game. So I think you stay in touch with how the game flows goes. You can predict how the game will go in your prep, and usually the prediction will be correct because teams are very linear. But sometimes you're casting teams like G2, and then you just have to watch your screen and you have to just explain what's happening in the moment. Whereas with other teams, you can predict what's happening before they happen.
Yeah. Okay. What about like in every single game, there's at some point where like there's no action and people are farming up for the next objective. I mean, typically around third dragon, there's like this downtime. Are there any points or any things that you like try and prepare for, or maybe like you have this great idea that you want to bring in because this the staleness will come at some point? Like, is it just like from the hip, or are you doing it like have you prepared something for those stall moments, or stale moments? I don't know what you call them.
Yeah, exactly. I think most of the time we call it a lull state, where it's just like nothing's happening.
Yeah.
But I think one thing I always do is just set up why this is happening currently, why not much stuff is happening on the map. And then usually, if I'm casting with Medic, he'll be very good at just saying, okay, great. So now we know why much stuff is not going to happen. Let's talk about this then. And then he'll just bring in a point, and I'm relying a lot on him instead, being the one talking about the funny stuff. Sometimes you can have stuff prepared with it, but that's easier for once again, the guys that are designated duos, because they talk a lot. They do a lot more stuff together. And they can be like, oh, what if we do this for a next cast? What if we do this for the next cast? I don't know that specifically because I'm coming in with new people every time. So yes, you can have stuff that you have prepared. But sometimes it'll be hit or miss, especially if you only prepared it individually. Like it has to be something that that will be good with the duo. So I never really have something designated completely. I rely a lot on just the situation in the now and then improvising in exactly what's happening in front of me. And I obviously could be doing a better job at doing more prep for that, but I'm also good at just coming up with something in the moment and just having something to talk about then.
Yeah, because this brings it over to another point that I really wanted to talk about is like you get like there's so many casters in League of Legends, right? So you have so many ways to gain like experience and learn from other people. But have you thought about like maybe taking casters from other games or even just traditional sports and look at well, what are they doing? What are these commentators doing? Why does it work? And then try and apply it to yourself.
I've already done that quite a bit, especially in my off season. And you do that as well when you learn about the theory about casting. For example, you watch a game like tennis.
Yeah.
They'll talk in between the pauses of the game, but as soon as the game is on, no one will talk. It'll just be the audience is quiet, the commentators are quiet, applause happen, and then you start talking, analyzing, breaking it down a little bit. That's like, you can use that in terms of breaking down a replay perhaps or something else instead. Like your co-commentator is having a team fight, he's going off. I'm there analyzing everything, just having to remember it. And then as soon as the team fight is over, I don't have to pay much attention to what he was screaming about. I just have to break down every single thing that just happened in front of my eyes instead. So that's something where you can look on tennis instead. I think another thing is NBA commentators are extremely hilarious watching because they are really good at bringing in whatever talking point they feel like talking about in the middle of the game. So that's something you can use for the load state as well. And they're also very, very excited. They're great to look at for energy or something like that instead, because if an insane play happens in the NBA, all the casters will just lose their mind and they'll just be screaming out of the mind. And it's just like you get in on the hype, everything's just great. So that's a really cool thing experiencing as well. And then you get chess. I think chess is a really good one. for League as well, because you talk about rotation, you talk about the movement. Chess commentators usually will be speaking really fast, and they'll speak really fast for 10 minutes because it's like maybe speed chess 10 minutes, and you won't really get annoyed at hearing a guy speak fast a lot. You can't really do that in League, but the same theory is still behind it, of the fact that you have to explain a play before it really happens, and the idea behind a play, so the viewers understand why this happened. Because if you just watch chess and a guy just goes like, well, he moved the horse,
Yeah.
that doesn't really work. You have to explain why, and what scenarios now have come out of the horse being moved. It's the same in League. He got this kill. Why did he get a kill? What now happens? What movement can they make now that they've gotten this kill and they've gotten a gold lead? So that's kind of like things where you're looking at other sports and even stuff like chess as well to kind of get an idea of how you want to present stuff.
Yeah, and like a point I thought about here as well was like soccer commentators, football commentators, like they are really good at bringing up like history, so historical points for, let's say, a team or a player, or even like you look at the World Cup, right? They know, like they've seen, let's say, English football. We have an English football commentator. He's commentating for England. Well, he can tell you how good each player are and what they can do. Like, I mean, you can like apply that to Worlds as well, but also like to these LEC broadcasts, right?
Oh, 100%. I think though, League is a game where you can only do that for so long, because in football you do have more downtime, where there's more room to talk about these things. But in League, you can't do that all the time. You can't talk about all 10 players in League. You won't get time for it if you want to build in proper history. So the way I usually do it is that if a play happens, but I will of course build up a play a little bit beforehand, but I will build them up even more when they actually make a play. So let's say this guy gets a kill. I'll talk about, okay, he did this the last game as well. Here's the statistic he's had. Like, after stuff has happened, I'll start building the story to him. So you're not just talking about randomly about the player, but every time someone's doing well, you can build up even further with history or stuff he's done in the past, or anything, right? So I think that's a really great tool to have as well, and something that we are that we are utilizing as well a lot in League. Like, we have stats, we have history, old matches that we can bring up in the broadcast and show, and then have once again storylines that have been prepared beforehand.
Yeah, okay, so let's go a bit away from all the nerdy stuff and then talk a bit about, well, this split was the first split you had to cast in front of an audience in the LEC. Can you maybe talk a bit about that experience and what the difference is between like an empty room and audience?
Well, actually, I didn't actually get to be one of the lucky ones who was on the like caster desk in the audience. But luckily, I will be as soon as this new split starts. I finally get that opportunity. I did get tickets to finally be part of the audience again and be part of the esports culture once again, which is something I greatly missed. I was there back in 2018 in Royal Arena, where we had LEC finals there as well. I went to, when I was 16 years old, I went to Wembley as well to watch Worlds back then with my best mate. So it's something I've missed for sure, and it's only something I'm longing for. I think it brings you way more hype. It makes everything easy as well to do casting, because you have a crowd in the background building up these moments with you. If you're only in a quiet room, you have to just kind of make the infrastructure of how important this was. When a Drake dies in League, when there's no one in the crowd, the Drake just dies, and you're just kind of fine with it. But if a dragon dies, if there's a crowd, people will clap, and they'll be like, finally, we got an objective, things are moving forward. Like, it elevates standard stuff in League even more. Having the crowd is like having a third commentator, because of the sound that's coming through, because of the energy they bring as well. And I'm really looking forward to play around with that, because I think that's just going to be even greater for my style too.
Yeah, but also like like even clapping for ward kills, you know, cheering for ward kills. Yeah. But another thing is like when there's a crowd, right? There's a new atmosphere, and this atmosphere is something like the crowd does, but it's something like the commentators can help build this atmosphere with the crowd as well, and then you can see how it actually affects the players and how they can be more expressive and more, you know, emotional and more like invested in the games. Like, not that they aren't in the first place, but you know, playing against with a crowd is like something completely different, right? So like what about this challenge of like trying to build up an atmosphere and try and set the setting of how you want your cast to be like? Is that something you're looking forward to as well?
100%. And I think I'm going to be nervous for the first time in a really, really long time as well. Well, not for the first time, but, you know, I'm going to be feeling nervous. Again, probably like the first time I stepped in front of the camera, just due to the fact that it's an experience I haven't really gotten before, at least not in LEC. You know what, that's actually a lie. I have casted in front of a crowd. I did Red Bull solo queue at
Gamebox.
At the Gamebox, which was in front of a crowd. So that's actually a lie. I was just completely in my own head thinking about LEC. So I have done a crowd, and I think if at Gamebox at least there was a really fun atmosphere because I could just ask people to scream or give it up for this specific player if we were talking about that player, and they do it. It's something that's very nerve-wracking because you're a person sitting in front of 100 people maybe, and you are like, make some noise, and you have to hope and pray that your energy that you're giving the audience is good enough for them to actually want to make noise, right? Like you could say that, and if they just don't say anything, that's my biggest fear ever. That's just, you're gonna look incredibly stupid, and you're just gonna be great. That was not much energy. I'm not gonna do that again. But luckily, they did do a lot of that. I don't think you can do that to the same extent at the LEC, but I think it's a new place for me to start improving, or a new place for me to start learning something new, because I haven't really been too much in the environment. And I think this is where maybe some of the expertise for some of my co-caster will really start to come through once again.
Yeah, I mean, what you're explaining there is basically like a comedian's worst nightmare, and it's funny how
100%.
And that's funny how it applies to casting as well. But that's just the fact of it, right? And especially in Denmark, I was actually in the crowd at Gamebox as well. It was kind of fun, but like the stage was like really cool. There was a lot of people, and like the hype that you got over it like was pretty great as well. But one thing I wanted to talk about as well, now we talk about Red Bull and talk about Gamebox, like well, you're still active in the Danish community. You're still casting the Red Bull solo queue, the Red Bull 1v1, whatever they are doing, right? I mean, a stupid question, but maybe why are you still doing it?
I'm never gonna stop doing that. Working for Red Bull is one of the best people to work for. Well, I say people, it's a brand, right?
Yeah.
But it's one of the best brands to work for, and specifically because they don't always care about money. They're just making this event that by any means did not, like, Red Bull is a marketing company, right? They make red energy drinks, but their marketing is not through commercial. Their marketing is through events.
Yeah.
So that's part of their marketing budget, right? So when they make these League of Legends event, it's marketing, it's a commercial. It doesn't have to like profit. And because of that, we get these insanely sick events at League in a small country like Denmark that doesn't always have the biggest following that we would never have. No one's invested as much into grassroots in Denmark with these small tournament as Red Bull have. And the people that are working there are absolutely incredible. They'll treat you like a king, and that goes to the players, that goes to the casters, that goes to anyone working there. A lot of my friends that I used to work with for Flames is the same people producing it, so it also gives me a chance to go back to all the people that I've always worked with. And then once again, most importantly, I get to go back to the Danish community, and I get to feel like I did back in the day. I get to talk Danish. I get to communicate with the players that I don't talk to a lot with anymore, and that's something I miss a lot. So going to an event like a LAN event like that, talking with the players, going out with the players, doing stuff there as well with people that are part of your community is just something I'm never going to stop doing. Like as long as Red Bull is producing something in Denmark, I'll be there to work for it every time.
Yeah,
and that's never going to stop.
So you're still really invested in the Danish grassroots.
100%.
Yeah. Can you maybe Denmark are really good at esports. That's a fact.
Yeah.
We don't have many who play League of Legends, though. We don't have many who play Dota 2. We have a lot that play Counter-Strike. But why are we so good? Like, we are so much better at League of Legends than comparatively at Counter-Strike at this point in time, right now at least. But also historically, you have Froggen, you have Wicked, you have all the old Copenhagen Wolves with Deficio, and you have the Splice that you talk about, and you have all these Danish players, right? That's come through, that's been really great, that's won multiple splits. You have Perks, who was like the best Western player for 2 years straight and 2 back-to-back MSI finals, MSI win and Worlds finals, and I can go on. I mean, why are we so good at esports in Denmark, and especially like League of Legends?
So specifically, I'm no expert, right? I don't think that's the right answer, but the theory I've always had has just been the infrastructure. It's really easy to commit to esports in Denmark because of the infrastructure you have. school is free. You can always go back to university for free and get paid for it with SU, of course.
Yeah.
You take gap years after you're done with your gymnasium, if you go to gymnasium as well. And once again, you can take 2, 3, still go back to university if that's what you want to. There's always a security network. There's always something that just lets you commit. And I just think there's just so much free time. There's so many possibilities for you to just do whatever you want. Like, the creative industry is really easy to just actually get your work done through. I've always said this, but I feel like I'm by no means like a crazy nationalist, but I genuinely think that Denmark is the best country to grow up in the world. I think everyone is supplied with, so many opportunities on an equal basis. I think everyone can do what they kind of just want to set themselves out to do. Even me, right, as a caster, that was always why it was easy for me to commit. I could always be like, well, can always just go back to university and study if it all falls through. So let me give this 2 or 3 years. Let's see if it works. If it doesn't, great. And everyone has that possibilities. They could just say, all right, I'll give it 2 years. I'll work hard. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, great. I'm going back to university and I'm then just back into the normal world. That's at least my theory, why it's so easy for everyone to commit. Because you never have to worry about like anything falling through. You can always know that there's a security network. Even at the worst case scenarios, you got Kontanthjælp, and then you can just live on that. Like, it's exactly. Like it's just so easy to try and commit to your dreams.
Yeah, but one thing is commitment, right? Another thing is talent. And we have had so much talent as well. I mean, it might be like impossible to explain why, but like maybe it's a combination of like maybe mediocre to decent talent and then the commitment, or like what do you think?
I think it's also just like both the infrastructure set up around computers. Like pretty much every home nowadays will have a computer. Like you won't really see one without it. And even then, you get good internet pretty much all over Denmark too. Like I live in Germany right now. I'm lucky to have an internet where I get 35 ping, right? But most people will have terrible ping or something like that instead, right? They won't really be able to play on it to the same extent. I'm sure there's other regions where you get better ping as well. Once again, I don't have a definitive answer. It's really only guesswork from my side, but I just think that it's not one thing that's making Danes really good at esports. I think it's multiple things that's just allowing them to really just be the best at what they do. Because like, even, as you said, like we might not have that many in Dota, but we still have a 2-time world champion in Dota.
And the one who won the most money, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, in esports. Yeah. We might not have a Dane completely on top in Counter-Strike right now. Even then, we have Carrigan, who still won the major with FaZe, right? So there's like, even when it's not a full Danish lineup, there's still Danes involved in Counter-Strike and at the top at the same time. And Astralis, of course, for the longest time ever. Caps as well. There's probably, and Björksen in NA now as well, as like still some of the strong, long-standing members. I really don't have a one definitive way where I feel like this is why it works. But I mean, I can't complain about it. It's just fucking amazing seeing that we have so many great players all over the world.
Yeah, we're just the greatest country in the world.
Oh. Exactly. Boom. There's not much more to go off from.
No. Okay. Let's go a bit into like Quickshot specifically, because I have followed League since season 2. Summer split, I think. So it's many years, right? I've seen Quickshot for many years. I don't know how I would react if I saw Quickshot, for example. So can you maybe talk a bit, like, how is the experience of working with Quickshot and sjokz especially? Like, they are so experienced and everybody knows them and they are so talented at what they do. Can you maybe, like, tell me, like what is it, like, that makes them, like, they are excellent at their job? Like, can you have some behind the scenes on it? Like, why are they so good at their jobs?
They're the most passionate ever. They're, even to this day, I can sit in a green room with sjokz while we're watching a game, preparing analyst desk, and she will still scream, jump excitedly if plays are happening. You know, she loves what she is doing, loves what she's looking at right now. And the same with Quickshot, right? He prides himself on a lot of these things. Quickshot is very good at driving a storyline and a narrative, not only on players, but on himself as well. He is very conscious about every decision he makes. Like, he's the old man vibe that people get from Quickshot and all of that. He built that himself. He on purpose make old man jokes. He on purpose makes these things come out so people commentate about them, because he is really good at defining how do you brand yourself, what person do you want to be. And obviously that's a skill he's learned over the years. And I mean, to me specifically, coming into working with these people initially, I'm the kind of guy that won't get starstruck. I think that especially if you have to work with colleagues, you can't have a dynamic where you come in and you just want a selfie and an autograph of the person you're about to cast with. It's not going to go well. It's going to give you a completely bad vibe. And that was something I was very good at doing in the beginning. Like the feedback I got from my first week at the LEC was that you're really good at giving people the personal space that they need, because people work out, and sometimes when they come in the green room, they do makeup. They're not in the mood for a conversation. Like, they are normal people. We can't always be as energetic as we are in broadcast, because we're saving it for the broadcast. When we're just doing nothing, sometimes people just want to listen to music. They just want to browse Twitter, Reddit, whatever they're doing. And I think it's very important you give them their personal time to do that. If they talk to you, you talk back to them, you have a conversation like you would do with anyone. You're not trying to be intruding. You're not trying to force yourself onto them and just become friends with them. It's like any other thing that's quite natural. And that was something at least I nailed in the beginning. Once again, like the kind of little bit of like normal people skills coming through really worked for me there. And that was something that just got me the invitation to come back, because I'm easy to work with. And once again, I think that's one of the best qualities you can have, being easy to work with. And then, of course, being talented at the same time might also benefit you a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, what about the LPL? Like, what is the difference? Because there you're working online and you're working from home, and you have a completely different array of talent, and it's all these Australian and down under people. I don't know what you would call them, but how is it working with them, and then working in, like, they play League completely differently. Personally, my favorite way, like most entertaining way of playing. But how is like the difference there? Like,
I agree with you, and if I've always said this, if LPL had the same infrastructure LEC has in terms of how the talent is treated, how much the pay is, I would work LPL for the rest of my life. I prefer watching LPL any day of the week to like LEC. And LEC is fun to watch. It's not to say it's bad. It's just to say that LPL is way more exciting. Even bad teams in LPL are fun looking at, because they will never go down without a fight. I can watch Astralis, and I can just watch them slowly but surely die out, and nothing's happening in League, right? But even in LPL, it just comes through. So the League of Legends gameplay in itself is way better in LPL. The talent as well in LPL, they are crazy. Like the Australians and the Americans, while I said that the people need their personal space here in LEC, they don't do that in LPL. They're like, they come in and there's energy on from the get-go. Even if we're casting at 5 in the morning, which is what we had to get up for to kind of do the tech checks and all that, the conversations are just coming through. Everyone's having a good time. Everyone's really just gelling really good together. And I think they have actually been the team that tried to set me up the most when I came in, because at the LEC, you are an individual and you're working for yourself. No one's going to help you. Well, of course, they're going to help you a little bit, but it's not their responsibility to make you good. You have to work on that yourself. But even in the LPL, like if I had any issues, if I didn't understand a team because I hadn't been casting them for too long, I would ask Lyric back then, and he would come in. He'd fucking make a whole 5-page document about a team, and he'd be like, just mention these things, then it's going to sound really good. And he'd sit with me for an hour, even though he didn't have to make sure that what I put on the broadcast was really good. So I think for sure, like the passion is way more passionate at the LPL, because they are not allowed to relax. They have to be on all the time. The pay is not that high. If you're there because you watch the league and you love the league and you love everything you do about it. So it's not to say that people at LEC are not as passionate at all, because they still are really passionate people, as I explained earlier. But LPL people are just crazy. They're like, they match the league. They're not your average person. They're absolutely crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, like, does some of this craziness and this hype, it does like affect you as well, right? In a positive way. It like
100%.
Yeah. Okay, that's funny, because like you just see like, so like why do you think like the gameplay is so different from LEC and NA, like LCS, than to like the LPL?
I think it's a playstyle where the LPL for the longest time ever obviously have had very good mechanics, but they also see the game in a different way, where in the beginning, everyone was really looking at Koreans and their way of playing the game. Like, we're talking back season 3, season 4, right? Which was very macro oriented, which was like, we don't fight unless there's an objective and a reason to fight over this objective. But in China, it was just kind of, in the beginning, it was really messy. It was just like fight. But over the course of the year, they got more intelligent with the way and why they're fighting these things. Like, they don't have to fight over a dragon. They can legit just fight because they know they have pressure in mid lane and they have 10 seconds, 20 seconds where they can, we have a 20-second fighting window where we can just do it if we want to. All right, let's try and do it and see if we get an advantage. If you know that the enemy raptors are up spawning, well, okay, I have my support I can send up. Let's just make raptors an objective we're fighting over then. If you don't want to fight it, that's great. We just get a camp for free, and then that's still a little bit of gold. But if you do want to fight it and we're doing better, it's going to look a bit messy, but they're still coming out with a bigger gold lead and all that. So I think the aggression coming through over there, it's just to a point where they've refined it way more now. And I think sometimes, I think LEC is just too afraid to mimic that playstyle because maybe they don't feel like they have the hands. Maybe it's too uncoordinated. We want to be like able to put thought behind the plays we're making. You have to be able to explain why you're making this play. And sometimes if it's just like, well, I just think I'm better than this player, maybe you shouldn't go for the play then if it really doesn't work out. But sometimes it's players like that will shine through, that will be the best of the best. So certainly something like that is part of it. But I also just think that in the end, they are just mechanically better players that allows them to have a playstyle like this.
But also, I mean, when they have had this playstyle for so many years, right? They have like the craziest amount of limit testing, and they know exactly what, like, if they are stronger or not at every point in the game, and no better the champions and what they're against, right? So they have like this inherent knowledge that not a lot of players and like have, which is when am I strong in like to the minute almost, like I am stronger than you here, right? And then like backing it up with mechanics is like, okay, well, if I play this right, you can never get this Raptors because I will always win it. So you have to give it up, right?
Sure.
And that's like that's like some of the reasons why these LPL games against like non-LPL teams, like when they win, it's just so dominating, and it's just like on a completely different scale than like it's like getting your head smashed in, right? If you lose to an LPL team, whereas if you lose to an LCK team, it's more like you starving, like getting starved out, right? So it's like two different ways of getting destroyed, right? But like the other one is just more like really smashing. Like,
I think there's two ways to it. I think T1 is the one team that actually doesn't have an LCK playstyle, and they actually have an LPL playstyle where they are way more aggressive with the way they're playing. But I also think even in our region, I think you have teams like G2 and Fnatic that has kind of tried to become those kind of teams too, where they are limit testing and where they are pressuring, because it'll have to come to a point where you can't always just stay in the same thing, in the same level, and never try to move yourself forward to really know how far you can actually go. If you just continue playing the calculated style, at some point you will make a team that will just completely push you back away. You've never been pushed back, and all of a sudden you won't know what to do. So I think the top end of the teams at the LEC are actually they realize this as well, and they are trying to play a more aggressive playstyle, and they are playing an entertaining playstyle. I think the only reason, once again, I said that I would rather cast LPL rather all the time is because the bottom teams do it too.
Yeah,
and the
exactly.
bottom teams don't do it in LEC. The bottom teams are very like, we're just dying. And I wish the bottom teams as well, because you don't even have to fear getting relegated. We have a franchise, right? So I just wish that sometimes they just threw more emphasis and just like, don't be afraid. Let's try and just limit us. Let's try what's worked out for us and just throw it at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's something that like LCS does not do very much of, if at all, right? So why is it, like, why do you think, like, because LCS, right, especially TSM, like, they are not like really down all, like they're not playing well at all, right? But why is it that they are not trying some of these things that, like, with the limit testing, with the aggression, like, why is it they are always just satisfied playing the same way for like 8 years running now, and it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse, right? Like, why is it like the NA teams aren't trying to adapt to this kind of playstyle?
I think they are still trying to adapt to some extent, but I also think it's because there's so many shuffles all the time. Like I don't think I barely watch LCS, right?
Yeah.
But I think for sure that I genuinely think like that they are getting better. I don't think that they're falling behind. Like I still think that as a region they are improving. I think EG showed that as well. Despite going 0-6 to EG to G2, they still displayed that they could be competitive with a team like RNG if they had just been maybe 5% better in one of their games, right? So I genuinely still feel like the top aspect of the league in LCS is getting better. I think maybe with teams like TSM, it's just because they keep swatching players and I don't really understand their roster movement. So I think that's more a management thing than it is with a lot of other stuff. But in the end, that's not where my expertise really lies. So I don't have too many things to say about it.
No, but I mean, it's just funny because like we've seen LEC become better and better and better, and the European players and teams getting better and better, whereas like the improvement rate for LEC is just way higher than it is in the LCS on an international stage, right? Like you see the best international like tournament or result they've had was like CLG winning MSI, and then it was season 4 Worlds where Cloud9 started in like the semifinals of Worlds after a horrible, like a pretty bad format, right? So like they don't have really much to show for like so many years being in like the competitive environment, right?
I think it's coming. I genuinely think that NA's year is not the year where they win it all, right? But I think the year where it changes that. I think the best thing that could ever happen for NA was that EG won it. Genuinely, with two, like they had for the first time in a very long time, majority of that roster was North American and only 2 import slots, right? I think that speaks a lot to the fact that as a fan as well, you have stuff to root for still in North America. But I also think that they got experience because they're so young. You know, we're talking about 18, 17, 18 and 19-year-old players going up and get completely stumped by RNG and T1. That gives you a lot. Like if you can have the right takeaways for that, that sets like the foundation of your improvement too. So I genuinely still feel like the bottom of the LCS is still going to be incredibly trash, but I think there's going to be a very big difference between the bottom and the top, and I'm actually hopeful the fact that NA will start to do better now because of the beatings they've taken.
Okay, so let's talk a bit about MSI. You worked at MSI. There was like you worked at Worlds as well, and now MSI here. So like, what was your experience of working MSI?
I didn't expect to get MSI really. I was the only guest from the LEC that made it onto the MSI, which of course I'm very thankful for. But I would have been fine if I weren't there. I thought it's always great to get international experience, and it was the first time where I got an international experience where I was able to have work with a lot of the tier 1 teams as well. Just because T1 last when I did Worlds, I did play-ins. But yes, you had one good team, but I was like the 4th seed from China or something like that. Whereas now I got to cast and watch the best team, which is obviously such a great experience. Like you're watching the best of the best League of Legends you can ever have in the world, and you get to be part of it, breaking it down, explaining why these things are happening. You also get to work with international talent. I think my favorite caster this time around working with was Raz from NA. And Emily Rand is always someone I'm really good friends with, so just having them around Berlin, even when you're not working, going for a walk, going out for dinner together, something I really appreciate as well, building those relations. So yeah, I mean, working internationals are the best things you can ever do because the gameplay has never been better. The rivalry has never been better because it's literally happening in front of you. The friendships and the colleagues you're working with never been better. Everything in international is just absolutely perfect. The only thing I hated about this MSI was just the format. It got a little bit boring having to watch G2 do the same thing 4 times over against Order and EG, and then the 9-hour day or 9 game stay we had the last time where I was on it, I met at 4. I think I left 14 hours after, like 4 in the morning, and I left 14. It was absolutely tiring, and I was really happy to go on vacation after that day.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, but also like the groups into another group into a semifinal, like again, and then like with all the COVID and all the RNG not joining, and I mean everything. There were so many asterisks that I'm
not going to make any bold statements, but I'm just going to say it sucked. I think everyone can agree with that.
Yeah, like that was also my point. That's why I wanted like your perspective at working it, because we're like, I don't think any audience member or anyone is like is confused or like do not have their own opinion about it. I mean, that's not really important. It's like it's more important to know like what it was working it, because that's like a completely different experience than like only watching the broadcast.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, fans as well. They're like, it's not the fact that they didn't enjoy it. I didn't very much enjoy it either. I'm gonna be honest. Like, and it was fun the first 2 days, but then like as you get the same matchups again and again, and you just like they're kind of just the skill difference between these 2 teams playing each other is just like it's already there. It's like it's just a little bit unbearable watching, a little bit uninteresting in my opinion, even for me breaking it down. But it also lets you have some other strengths. Like you can look at it and be like, well, we know where this game is going. Time for you to make it entertaining in a different way that will make viewers to win. And that always lets you try and improve on a different aspect. I mean, I think even in the shittiest situations, there's always a positive takeaway you can have from it. And I think even with MSI, there's still something that I could improve on.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's great. Okay, so LEC Summer Split is coming up very soon. It's next week, right? Next Sunday. And
Friday.
Yeah, Friday. Sorry, yeah. And well, you are working it. So do you have a favorite? And why is it G2?
I'm not supposed to have favorites, and I think my favorite team is just the one that plays the best League of Legends because it's the one I get to describe most things and most theory about in League. I think fans often have a misunderstanding of that. Like, they all call us G2 biased or Fnatic biased when they're playing, right? But it's literally because they are using most concepts in the game. Like, I'm not going to talk about a team and just continuously shit on them why they're not doing things well and just be like, well, they could have done this, but they didn't do it. They didn't do this, they didn't do this. It's way better to have a positive insight on the game and just be like, look at Fnatic, look at what they're doing so well because they're doing this and this and that and that. So yes, sometimes the broadcast will become a little bit one-sided in terms of like what team you're talking about the most. But I will always talk about the most about the team who's doing the best because they'll give you the most. They'll give you the most to talk about. And I can understand as a fan that sometimes when your team is taking a beating, and then the caster won't even talk about your team taking a beating, that it feels bad. But also to understand that I don't have anything positive to say about your team. So the fact that I'm not right now is actually a good thing for you. So I think that's one thing in terms of picking favorites. But I'm excited. I think this summer will be way better than spring was initially. Some roster swaps has come through from some teams. So yes, some teams will still have to go through this little phase of finding out how do we actually play the game together. But we get to have set teams coming in now. I think watching G2 after MSI and what they did there is going to be incredibly funny. I think watching Fnatic as well after not being able to make it to see if that really gave them a beating where they're going to be looking a bit taking back at the beginning, or if that really gave them something that's going to light their fire and just have like grinded through on scrims and everything to really come back being the best team ever. And they even, you know, some of the smaller teams like Mad Lions coming through with some of their substitutions, Haru as well, and Vitality. Vitality is a roster. Are they actually going to look better now that the jungler has been swapped out? How's it going to be looking like? And there's a lot of question. Even Astralis with their entire revamp. I don't exactly agree with the way that it's been built, but I find it very exciting that they've brought in a challenger support from Korea that one of my colleagues from LCK Chronicler is very, very fond about. So I think it's gonna be very, very interesting seeing all these specific teams find their own identity and brawl it out against each other.
Yeah, okay, so like maybe you don't have a personal favorite, but like do you have do you have an expectation of who's doing well? Like for example, Vitality, do you believe in Haru? Like is he the missing piece that's gonna make this team become like what the super team it should be? But yeah, you know, super teams in Europe.
Haru is good,
yeah,
but he's not gonna fix the mistakes that Vitality had. He's not gonna fix some of the issues we saw from the bot lane, because that's up to the bot lane, for example. He's not gonna fix some of the overextension that we sometimes see from Alfari or the lack of vision control set up around him. I think Vitality as a team have a lot of more issues than what was just ingrained into a jungler. But to give them the benefit of the doubt, sometimes just having one player come in and bring an entirely new, fresh breath of air into the team atmosphere can do wonders and completely change the mindset of everyone. It might not be the just decision, but sometimes it could be the right decision. And let's see if Vitality then can make it happen. It is an interesting roster following, specifically with the players coming through, but it's not the roster I'm looking at the most. I mean, obviously, I'm excited for Haru. I've just cast him in the NLC. I'm hoping he will do well. I'm hoping he's not going to flop it and suck like they kind of did last split. But all in all, I'm just hoping for good League of Legends and elevated League of Legends from what we had from spring. And it's going to be interesting as well with the durability patch coming through to see how the game's changed in the LEC.
Yeah, because one thing about the durability patch that's super interesting when you watch streams, right? There's so many people playing Vayne. Top, mid, AD carry, doesn't matter. People love playing Vayne because like she's arguably the best champion to receive this, like according to this durability buff, right? Because she has the percentage true damage, right? So I wanted to ask you, like, do you think will Vitality hit playoffs then?
I still think Vitality will hit playoffs. I certainly think so. It might just be as a sixth place team, but I do think they'll hit it. I think the teams below them, I think actually Vitality might have a contest with SK. It's going to sound weird, but SK might come into a really good form because they just look better in the second half of the split of spring. But I definitely still think they're in the contention for the 6th or 5th spot. At least that's where I'd put them at the end of the summer if I had to rank them myself.
Yeah, okay. What about Odo Amne? Will he get his first title?
Odo's great. You know, he's a fun person. He's a great top laner. I just don't think it's gonna happen.
Oh,
unfortunately. I really would hope for him. I think he's he's kind of coming to this level where it's like if you had to pinpoint a person who deserved the title, who's never won a title, he'd definitely be one of them in Europe. He's just really good, and I mean, I hope he can make it, but in the end, that's really going to be up to him and his team. If they get the title, well, then they deserve it, and they get it. If they don't get the title, well, they didn't deserve it then.
Yeah, that's true. Another thing, because this is going to be super interesting, right? Because, like, Europe right now is really stacked, right? It's going to be a super interesting season. But what's really, like, interesting and what might be the deciding factor, right? There's, like, a pretty big cutoff between, like, the good teams, like, 1 to 6, 7, right? And then, like, the bottom 3. So, like, maybe, like, do you think the key to hitting playoffs and potentially getting Worlds is actually the amount of upsets the bottom teams actually can get against the upper teams?
I don't think it's going to come down to that. I think in the end, it's just going to come down to making playoffs. And if you can hit your form in playoffs, then that run you're making for Worlds will be the one that matters. I think, of course, the bottom teams have a role to play in terms of seeding. But in the end, we've seen lower bracket ones multiple times now in the LEC and playoffs just making it all the way. Well, I mean, G2 just now, right? Yeah. With the 12-0 streak coming in from the lower bracket. I think the most important thing for all these teams is just having the mentality of, we just need to be as good as we can. If we're flopping some games every now and then, like start season, mid-season here, it's fine. As long as you make it to playoffs and you refine your style to when you make playoffs, that's the most important part. That's exactly what happened to G2. They were so shaky. They had all sorts of different picks that they wanted to work in the start of the season. When they came into playoffs, they refined the meta. They had the better scrim bubble where they came through with Jarvan in the jungle on the top side, and then just have easy to execute team fight compositions around Drakes, and they would win every team fight every single time. And they kept doing this, and they did it all the way to MSI. I think you just need to hit the mark when you reach playoffs. Whatever happens at the start of the season, screw it. Doesn't matter. Well, maybe it does in terms of like some of the few games there, but if you are in playoffs, you're not going to think back to the first games you lost. You're going to be thinking about moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. So, on a scale from like 1 to 10, like, what are your expectations of this next summer split starting soon?
I actually think we're going to put it at a solid 9, like a solid 9 or 8, like, because you could take teams like SK, who was incredibly boring watching last spring, at least in the beginning, but towards the end, even they became really funny watching, and I think they're going to continue with that. So we have one bottom team that's at least elevated themselves. I think Misfits now as well, coming in with a new top laner, might have a different refined style as well, and hopefully more to build on as well, where it's not just a VTO show, but it can be more people coming together, because I think that people often forget that rookies need time, and I think Misfits is one of the few organizations that's actually taking it in to actually give these rookies time, right? They could have swapped out that jungler if they wanted to, with Zlatan having a little bit of a shaky season, but they continue to build on him. They continue to kind of just, polish this call, make him into a diamond at some point, under a lot of pressure, which he obviously will be receiving and have received from the first spring, especially from fan sentiment. So I think they'll be better coming in through it. I think Excel, with a full roster from the get-go, where they had Advn, swapped in Mickey, looked better towards player, even made players, right? Coming in now as well with this experience might even be better as well. So I think just from like what happened in spring is just automatically going to elevate this team, despite a new patch coming through.
Yeah, do you think like this patch will have a great influence on like the drafting and the team comps we're gonna see?
For sure, I think players who are better in teamfight scenarios and more skilled in that scenario will shine way more now. I think people who sometimes would make a few laning mistakes will be less punished now unless they're playing against a real lane bully. That's why we see Asia so much, for example, now. Champions with low cooldowns is really going to benefit of this. So that means like Orianna, Asia, all these champion burst mages, not so much. The champions like Syndra, who's like all about hitting that ultimate immediately, won't get the one shot and then kind of useless because you have long cooldowns, not going to be as volatile. So people who's good about small cooldowns, micromanaging their movement and the way they're using their abilities are going to look really good. So I think for sure that some of the best mechanics in team fights will come through, and less from laning will shine this time around.
Okay, so like what champions do you see as the key like meta champions that might get like almost a permanent permaban status?
I think Lilia for sure will be permabanned in the jungle. She's got like a build where she goes Conqueror, Riftmaker. She's just unkillable. She gets like an insane amount of Omnivamp, Spell Vamp, and she just never die. Her clear is just the fastest in the game as well. So Lilia for sure. Gwen in the top lane is looking really, really oppressive. I think Asir in the mid lane will probably have a 100% pick ban as well coming through. In the AD carry department, yes, you can argue for champions like Cockmore. That's looking really good. But even champions like Cockmore is still niche in my opinion. It can still be punished if teams do it correctly. He's just really broken in solo queue because that you can't really punish a champion like that in solo queue. And the same goes for Vayne. I think Vayne will have moments where she'll shine, but I also think she won't be blind pick 100% of the times because there is ways you can shut her down still. So I think from the side of bot lane, just a lot of enchanters from the support enchanters are just so easy to play at the moment. So enchanter, AD carry, that's just going to be scaling up as per usual, and then just whatever makes your team fighting good is probably going to be good.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, I can't wait to see that. Okay, amazing. Well, I don't really have much more. So, like, do you have like a subject or something that you want to talk about before we end it?
Not really. I feel like I've been through quite a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
of the life, yeah.
Okay, so do you have any final shout-outs, any last messages, any something you want the people of the Reddit sphere and the Twitter sphere to hear? Maybe something for, I don't know, aspiring casters, or why, I don't know. Do you have anything?
I don't know. If you're an aspiring caster, then for sure just keep doing you. Keep bringing you to the product. It's not going to do anything if you bring another videos to the show. We already have a videos. There's no reason to do that. So for sure, don't always just look to other people. It's fine to get inspiration, but in the end, like, it's you're bringing to the camera. And for the fans, just, you know, we're in the same boat as you. If we're watching Bad League, it's not much to do about it. Sometimes it's just difficult. But all in all, I've been really happy with the way that I've been received, both from the EU fans. I rarely ever get any mean comments about me. I've actually seen way more overwhelmingly positive comments. So yeah, for the people that are fans of me, well, keep supporting me. I really appreciate it when I get messages or shout out on Twitter. It really makes my day. So continue with that too.
Great. Well, oh yeah, final note, LEC, we want Guldborg in a music video. So thank you for...
One day.
Yeah, thank you for joining me.